Tomorrow will be Captain Masanobu Kuno's final mission. He knows it. And whether or not he would admit it, the tide of war has turned against Japan. Kuno sits down and pens one final letter to his 5-year-old son and 2-year-old daughter. Dear Masanori and Kyoko, even though you can't see me, I'll always be watching you. Your father will become a spirit and watch you too closely. Both of you study hard and help out your mother with work. I can't be your horse to ride, but you two be good friends. I'm a cheerful person who flew a large bomber and finished off all the enemy. Please be an unbeatable person like your father and avenge my death. Father. Kuno climbs into a plane loaded with explosives. He flies southward for a few hours and smashes into the side of an Allied warship. Mission complete. He was a kamikaze pilot, one of thousands of Japanese men who volunteered to be aerial suicide bombers in the last years of World War II. Many soldiers see it as a glorious opportunity to die for Japan. One 21-year-old kamikaze pilot writes to his father, "I will live for an eternal cause. Death leads to life. Death is a joy. When I offer up this body, the empire will flourish forever." Such fanatical desire for martyrdom, even in the face of defeat, seems to go beyond mere patriotism, or even the ultra-nationalism of Japan's recently toppled ally, Nazi Germany. This militaristic zeal is rooted in something else, something ancient. The Japanese Shinto religion traditionally thought of the emperor as a kami or deity, himself descended from the sun kami Amaterasu. He acted as one of countless kami, spiritual essences that included powerful deities of the elements as well as fallen soldiers in natural landscapes. On the cosmic scale between ordinary human and powerful deity, the emperor fell somewhere in between, acting as a shaman who performed rituals to ensure the kami granted bountiful rice harvests. Even as centuries passed and emperors ceded power to the military leaders of the shogunate, the emperor remained a spiritual leader. Then, in 1868, a revolution, which dragged an isolated nation populated with peasants and samurai into the modern world. Farming villages and folklore were supplanted with factories and notions of science and imperialism. Oligarchs had wrested power from the shogunate, and in an event termed the Meiji Restoration, they proclaimed the revival of the emperor's authority. Except Emperor Meiji's status looked very different from that of ancient emperors. Officials now framed him as a kind of supreme infallible kami, entitled to unquestioning loyalty from the people and the military. Invoking his divine image, Japanese officials now justified aggressive expansion into nearby countries and the suppression of political opposition. Schools, Shinto shrines, and barracks became vehicles for militaristic propaganda. By the onset of World War II, Emperor Hirohito, or Emperor Showa, has taken the throne. His regime touts an ironic mission to liberate Asian nations from Western imperial control and instead bring them under Japanese imperial control. Like Western imperialism, occupation comes with racial overtones, a suggestion that the divinely favored Japanese have a right to rule over other Asians. Any supposed racial solidarity here does little to prevent the Japanese army's frequent massacre of native civilians and POWs, widespread use of sex slaves, and human experimentation. Japanese soldiers follow the old samurai code of ethics, Bushido, but with a nationalist tint. Commanders press into soldiers the idea that one should not fear death, that it is the highest honor to die for the emperor and a disgrace to surrender. Soldiers like Kumataro Kubota dutifully embrace these ideas. As he and his troops invade the Philippines, he writes, "Death on the battlefront is the most respectable possession one could hope to attain. The dead warrior becomes the son of the emperor and a kami." It's as the empire begins to crumble that spiritual devotion becomes dangerous to Japan itself, as one Japanese general reveals to his American captors after the war. The Japanese, to the very end, believed that by spiritual means they could fight on equal terms with you. We believed our spiritual confidence in victory would balance any scientific advantages, and we had no intention of giving up the fight. Yet there's a problem with broadly asking what the Japanese believe. For whatever ideals the Japanese government professes, indoctrination and censorship are imperfect. It's in a diary where Kubota extols the glory of a noble death on one page, yet laments the death of a brother in arms on another. It's here he expresses sadness upon orders to execute 3,000 Filipino POWs who resisted Japanese occupation. Likewise, letters home show skepticism of the imperial agenda even among the ranks of the supposedly fanatical kamikaze pilots. One 23-year-old writes to his father, "While in the military I discovered the meaning of existence, where a person obtains a place to die. Still, I was not able to think that military life, where I had to suppress myself until the end, was a nice world to live." Regarding opinions on life and death that I got several times from Lieutenant Okubo, I feel that while in fact they seem penetrating, he said nothing more than military superficialities. In the 23 years since I was born, there was also a way of thinking that was only mine, but I will not express it since now that is useless. Even now I feel sorrow in my heart for some politicians who deceive the majority of the nation's people who are honest. He obeys orders and kills himself in a kamikaze attack soon after. Enthusiasm for the war will vary among civilians throughout the conflict. Many are fanatical, but others are indifferent, and some quietly see the war and subsequent shortages of goods as an unwelcome disruption of day-to-day life. And as the war reaches the mainland, propaganda and censorship do little to obscure the reality of devastating aerial attacks from the Allies. With virtually no air defense, the Japanese government still declines to construct bomb shelters out of fear that doing so might lower civilian morale. One student writes, "The government's attempts to harden people's nerves and prepare them against panic are having only negative results. The danger of air raids is freely and constantly discussed in the secrecy of family circles, and fear is undisguised among friends in universities, factories, and practically all circles where one can talk frankly. Some leave for the countryside, others stay. One middle school student, still in the city, is sitting in class on a sunny morning in August 1945. A friend by the window notices an American plane in the sky. And suddenly, a flash pierced my eyes. The entire building collapsed at once and we were trapped underneath. I don't know how long I remained unconscious. When I came to, I couldn't move my body. Cuts on my face and hands throbbed with pain. My front teeth were broken and my shirt soaked with blood. The school that should have appeared before my eyes was nowhere to be seen. It had vanished and only smoldering ruins remained. Beyond the school, toward the center of town, all I could see was a sea of flames. I was so terrified I couldn't stop shaking. Of the 100,000 people just killed in the atomic bombing of Hiroshima, most are civilians. In the next week, the Soviet Union declares war on Japan, and the US drops another atomic bomb on Nagasaki. The military leaders of Japan are still eager to continue the war at all costs, but Emperor Hirohito soon intervenes and surrenders to the Allies. It's made official on September 2nd. War criminals will be identified and tried, if inconsistently, and the Allies force the Emperor to publicly acknowledge that he isn't a god. And here, with tens of millions dead across just the Pacific, lives interrupted, it's natural to ask who or what is to blame. The old imperial system and Shinto religion weren't inherently responsible for the destructive militarism that sparked so much bloodshed across Asia, but they were often its complicit allies. In studying the Imperial Japanese military, we observe the grim simplicity with which national identity, traditions, faith can be bent, twisted, and sharpened into weapons for militaristic interests. I think the end of World War II should be experienced in vivid, full-color detail, and that's why you should go watch the documentary Endgame on Magellan TV right now. It's part of their World War II in the Pacific series. You can click the link in the description and get a full month of Magellan TV membership absolutely free. From there, you have access to a new kind of documentary streaming membership with over 2,000 documentaries. Magellan TV was founded by filmmakers who specialize in producing beautiful content that dives deep into diverse subjects. Magellan TV's massive catalog provides the richest and most expansive history content available anywhere. They have ancient, modern, and war history, biographies, and even other genres like crime and science. And they're constantly adding new programs every week. For no extra cost, you can access their 4K selections and stream all of these with no interrupting ads. So click that link and you can start streaming these through your TV, mobile device, laptop, or other streaming device right away.